Today we're going to spend a lot of time exploring the impact of probiotics on the skin microbiome and how it pertains to dermatology. As dermatologists, we always want to give our patients all the options to take care of their skin, and this one in a holistic approach. To discuss this topic, I am very excited to have Dr. Doris Day, a nationally recognized cosmetic dermatologist practicing in New York City, who has written several books, but the one we'll focus on today is titled Rebooting the Biome. How properly to take care of your skin from a microbiome standpoint, and how it could do more for your health and beauty than any skincare ingredient on the market. So, Dr. Dre, welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you here today on the Derm Club podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thank you so much for having me on. And this is my dog, and his name is Bo. So today he's Dr. Botox. So you can
Love
see
it.
his
Dr.
doctor
Botox is super cute.
bag.
So, I have spent a good amount of time reading about the microbiome and also some parts of your book, and I have several questions that I couldn't fully answer myself. So, I'm hoping you could shed some light on them. First and foremost, I'm very curious about your book, Rebooting the Biome, and the inspiration behind writing it.
Well, I wrote it with my colleague, Dr. Thomas Hitchcock, and he is a PhD in genetics. And we met when he worked for a company that then became Altherapy and Althera. So at the time it was Altherapy, and it was eventually bought by Merz. But we met and did some research projects together over about 10 years or so. And the more I spoke with him, the more I realized that this is one really very smart human being. And he was building a company based on, he started a company called Zycrobe, and he was looking at the skin biome and ways to improve skin quality by looking at the microorganisms that live on the skin. And he was able to come up with actually a true skin probiotic. But sort of watching him build that line really helped me understand that we in dermatology study structure and function of the skin. We study disease states where we have overgrowth of certain bacteria, but we don't necessarily study the normal state of the skin biome and how that affects health and disease. So that was something. I just have to open the door, let him out. Sorry about that.
It's
Dog
okay.
had to leave. So that was something that I had a great interest in, because what I was learning is that when we have things like eczema or acne, we talk about overgrowth of certain bacteria, but we don't talk about the healthy balance. And think of it as an ecosystem. If you put an ecosystem into balance, you'll have certain plants naturally inhibit other plants or other bugs or other predators. And we try to control all those elements in the skin. For example, if you culture skin that has eczema, we can say, well, you have overgrowth of staph or strep epidermis, but we don't look and see that, oh my God, you're missing C. acnes in that state. And C. acnes was keeping those other strains or bacteria at bay. So sometimes rebalancing the biome can help treat skin conditions in ways we didn't think before. And that really worries me, because a lot of the treatments we do today either try to annihilate all the bacteria or their food source. When I look at some of these devices that try to either greatly reduce or even destroy the sebaceous glands, well, sebaceous glands make food for those bacteria. Those bacteria are making postbiotics that help with hydration, can help with scar repair, can help with so many healthy elements of the skin. And I don't necessarily want to knock out their food source. I mean, there's people who have overgrowth of sebaceous glands, but they're the niche. They're not the norm of like normal acne patient. They're the exception of the acne patient who has a specific issue. But we tend to treat everybody the same.
Very interesting. And we're going to get more into acne and those topics very soon. So, as I'm sure you're aware, the scientific evidence that probiotics change the microbiome is very much in question, and it's controversial. And I am by no means an expert, but I do understand that there are variable opinions. Some are in favor of probiotics and others are not. And I would love to hear why you lean towards the side. I understand that you have discovered with your co-author that there are, the food supply can change the microbiome, but what has kind of swayed you to be more in favor of a probiotic than not?
Well, when I was younger and in training and shortly after, when people would say, "Oh, if I eat pizza or if I eat this food, is it going to make me break out?" And we would say, "Well, all the studies we have doesn't show that, but if it makes you feel better, don't eat those foods." Or I realize that people think if you eat pizza, it's greasy and that grease goes right from your body to your skin. And so, no, that doesn't happen. So there is a sense that those things don't happen. But over the past 25 years, we've come a long way in understanding how important the gut biome is for everything. I mean, we're learning now that the gut biome can be responsible for Parkinson's disease, can be responsible for so many conditions that we never gave it credit for. There's a great article by Dr. Haynes Ely, who sadly has passed away, but he wrote a brilliant article called Is Psoriasis a Bowel Disease? And he talks about leaky gut. We know that inflammation in the from foods that we eat, the simple, highly processed sugars and foods do create inflammation, and that inflammation affects every organ system from the skin to the brain to the liver to the kidneys to joints to everywhere. And if you're prone to something, that's probably what's going to flare in you. Some people have more or less sensitivity to it, but it's more common than we realize. And I see that when I change my patient's diet, when they have something like psoriasis, their psoriasis gets better. I add sometimes in things like metformin, or I add in some supplements like quercetin and duozyme, and I find that minimizing alcohol and other simple sugars really does help. I've had patients essentially be cured, and I use the word cured not lightly, of their psoriasis by making those changes. So I think that there's a lot that, or let's say long-term remission, if not cure. But I've seen remarkable changes from people who make significant changes in their diet. But the reality is that most people don't want to. They'd rather do a once a week or once a month shot or take a pill or do something else so they can continue their lifestyle. But my goal is not just for people to look better, but to actually be better. So like today I had somebody who had alopecia areata that was pretty extensive. So we talked about the drivers of it. I go, this isn't your fault. This is something that just happens. It's autoimmune. It's it's unfortunate. You don't deserve it. You didn't ask for it. This is just it stinks. It sucks. It's awful. Because she's an adult woman and she's bothered by it. I mean, it's pretty extensive. I said, so I'm going to do what I can to grow every hair back. And fortunately, we have these drugs we didn't have before, so we have a good chance of it. I said, but and we'll do that for sure, but let's also think about the stress that might be driving it. Because if we can address that, and we talked about what those might be, and she had so many great ideas, and I could see she already felt better. So we can mask something that somebody has. We can make things better on the skin, on the surface, but I always want whatever that we can also affect in their overall health that we can improve. I want to make those changes so that now they don't just look better, but they are better. And people really over time do gravitate towards that and they appreciate it. And it doesn't take very long to do. So I encourage everyone to try it because once you start down that path, it's very, very rewarding for you and and especially for the patient.
Right. So you mentioned stress as a driver of many possible medical conditions, and I believe that too. Do you have any tips that you would say for stress reducing activities or things that patients can do or try?
Well, get a dog. So my dog is incredibly helpful for stress. Borrow a friend's dog or uh, having pets is a great stress reducer. I think also accepting whatever it is you're feeling and just telling yourself it's okay. It's okay. You feel what you feel. I think a lot of times what is stressing us is our feelings about something, not the thing itself. And just acknowledging your feelings, something as simple as just saying, this is what I'm feeling. I had a patient today, we finished Accutane, she's doing great, but with all the things going on in the world and she has family that's involved, she's breaking out again. She's so stressed. And she's having panic attacks and definitely coming out with cystic nodules again. And we adjusted her medicines for her acne and came up with some ideas there, so that I know will help her. But we also talked about listening to a guided meditation, not just meditating, but listening to a guided meditation. Sam Harris has an app called the Waking Up app, and he has some great guided meditations and also lectures about anxiety. But I think using the word stress is sort of such a broad term that, like, of course you have stress. It's how you manage the stress and how you look at it. So if you look at stress as like everything's the end of the world, then that's pure stress that has no value. But if you change the way you look at it and say, well, this is a puzzle, and I'm going to now solve this puzzle. And then you realize that really, as Thomas Sowell said, there's no solutions, only trade-offs. So you say, well, I want this. What is it? What are my trade-offs to get to this? Is it worth that? And am I going to make that effort? And you sort of make those trade-offs to get to your point that will then address in that way your stress. But you take away the stress again is the idea and the feeling, not the thing. So acknowledging what you're feeling and then sort of giving yourself the permission to feel that and being okay with it, and then breaking things down into smaller bites that you can handle, or sometimes just saying no to things. Just learning to be more centered around yourself. And being self-centered and being selfish are two different things. If you're selfish, you think other people are responsible for your happiness. But being self-centered is recognizing that you are responsible for your own happiness and well-being, not everybody else's, except for your children. And then once you sort of get into that mode where you realize it's okay to be okay with taking time for yourself and doing for yourself, I think those things alone start to relieve that stress. But different stressors drive different conditions. Like for hair loss, I find that people often feel like everybody asks a lot of them because they're very capable. And so they literally get pulled in too many directions at once. So like, you want this done? I can do it. Yeah, I'll do it. It's easier to do it than to ask. You want that? Okay, I can do that. Family, friends, relationships, children, siblings, pets, everything. You could do everything for everybody, but you don't always want to. It's just that you can. And so somebody asks, you're like, sure, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. But then you realize that you don't want to do those things and there's nothing left for you. And I think that can drive hair loss specifically. With acne, it's a stress of like wanting to achieve and then sort of just falling into bad habits of eating bad foods and not sleeping and doing things that drive it. So everyone needs to think about what their stressor is, how they react to it, and sort of what it drives in them and how they can help to relieve that. Walking for me is so therapeutic. I walk to and from work every day, and that's meditative. By the time I get home or to work, I've solved problems I didn't even know I had or didn't even think about, but it just makes things better. So exercise, stress, getting enough sleep, if you're older, hormone replacement, all of those things help us clear our minds and be able to think more clearly.
Yes, I was going to say, we know that exercise is good for our heart and our brain health. And I wanted to understand what you felt is the connection between exercise and the role it plays in our skin health.
Oh, there's actually a recent paper that talks about exercise directly correlating with skin health. It improves circulation, improves hormones, neuromuscular. There's so many levels at which exercise directly improves skin health and especially weightlifting. So it also helps against dementia and other things. It's one of those things where my dad always instilled in us how important exercise were. And he separated exercise and diet as two completely different levels of care. You can't make up for a bad diet with exercise, and you can't make up for lack of exercise with a good diet. You need both independently, and they're both super important.
So As a dermatologist, we know that antibiotics are commonly prescribed for patients for different skin conditions, whether it be acne or rosacea, and the list goes on. But today I'm just
Yeah.
going to focus right now on acne. So, for acne patients, it's very common that we give them a long dose of antibiotics. It could be from 3 months or even beyond that, which is, I often find when I tell someone, like, okay, you're going to be on doxycycline for 3 months, they're like shocked, like, oh, it's safe to be on doxycycline for 3 months. I've never heard of something like that. I thought you only go on an antibiotic for 7 days. Um,
Yeah.
and this has kind of become the norm, for better or for worse. Do you believe that this has a negative impact on the microbiome? And how about, like, if you do believe it does, what do you do in those patients that are not responding to any other topical acne treatments and that may need antibiotics?
It used to be that doxycycline was my first line treatment. I would do doxy, a benzoyl peroxide wash, and a retinoid. And that would be, I'd say the doxy will get you clear, and then the retinoid will keep you clear. But now, for the past several years, I've knocked out oral doxycycline or any oral antibiotics from about 95% of my acne treatments. I'll use supplements like niacinamide, copper, zinc, folic acid combinations to help acne. I'll talk about diet. I'll use topicals. I like Eraslo and Altrino as two that I think are better tolerated in terms of brands, and Azelaic acid and other things, whether it's acne or rosacea. But I've found that that works as well as antibiotics did. Now, for those few people who need antibiotics, I typically won't go more than 4 months. So 3 months is my typical, like you, but four would be my max. And then we'll do something like Accutane, or we have our Fotona laser that can help rebalance. And I'll try to look at skin probiotics as a help for them, not oral probiotics, but topical ones, and that can help as well. So we talk about really good skincare. Sometimes they're using too many products. We'll just stop using products for a little bit and rebalance what they're using. And a lot of people are sort of influenced by either things on social media or advertisements that come to them, or they go to Sephora and they end up using too many things and they don't even really have acne. They just have irritation that looks like acne. So just calming down what they're doing and simplifying their routine can be super, super helpful. But yeah, it absolutely affects your gut biome, Doxy, and it can affect it for over a year. I mean, it's not ideal. The one I'll sometimes use is Oracea, which is a time release 40 milligram dose of doxycycline, and that's not an antibiotic. It doesn't seem to affect the gut biome, and it's time release 40 milligrams, so they get good levels. And for people who have ocular rosacea, it's really helpful. Also helps against gum disease. So that's something that I'll put people on indefinitely. But antibiotics, I'm as hesitant as possible to use, and I will limit the time and then either switch them to some other treatment or just try to analyze what could be driving the acne.
So, in terms of topical probiotics, you believe that they are able to penetrate beyond the superficial layer of your skin.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really have to go that far. They just have to get to the follicle because these are living on the skin. So there are some good topicals. There's one Biojuve that's what my co-author made. And that one is C. acnes. It's a strain of C. acnes called C. acnes defendens. And the patients that I've put on it have had incredible results. They've had less redness, less breakouts, the scars get better, and they like using it. And interestingly enough, they also have better hydration without adding a moisturizer, because those skin probiotics, when they either break down or what they produce, the postbiotics, break down to things that actually help hydrate the skin. They break down to free fatty acids, and other elements, propionic acid, things that are going to help with skin balance. And because you're giving the skin what the skin should have, the skin is naturally going to rebalance. So this isn't gut probiotics that you're putting on the skin. These are actually skin probiotics. And what Dr. Hitchcock and I sort of discovered, what he helped me understand was that there's different strains of C. acnes. So C. acnes defendans is a strain that actually has many good qualities. One of the most common bacteria in your skin is C. acnes. And as you age, you actually have less C. acnes. So C. acnes, if you have eczema, you have less C. acnes. That where you see more infections and poor skin healing, you see less C. acnes. And just like with C. acne strains, there's probably staph strains also. And these strains keep each other in check. So instead of using antibiotics to wipe things out, if you just transplant the right strain, you can help reduce the bad strain and keep the skin in balance without having to go to these cannonballs to hit a nail. You can actually do it by rebalancing. And we tell some good stories in the book about how in one of the national parks, I think it was Yellowstone, the wolves were starting to bother people and they were becoming problematic. So they went in and they killed all the wolves. Then they realized that the wolves kept the elk in check. So without the wolves, there were an overgrowth of elk. And the elk ate all the foliage, and the foliage is what harbored and was home to all the birds. And so without the foliage, the birds were dying off. So you think you're making one small change that's going to rebalance the skin, but you're changing a whole biome, and you can really mess things up without trying. So what they did was they introduced the wolves back, and it took years, but now it's restored. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to restore an ecosystem and understand that you're teeming with bacteria. We cannot live in sterile environments. We just don't. It's impossible. The world is full of bacteria, bugs, viruses, fungi, and that your ecosystem can balance that and can manage it. You just have to help support it. And that's what I try to do for my patients, is to understand where it's gone awry, what's driving it, and then try to help support a more balanced and healthy ecosystem to help the skin structure and function work properly.
So do you also encourage a gut probiotic in addition to a topical one?
I don't have one that I recommend in particular because there's so many, and I just don't know of one that happens to be great. But I do say that eating things like sauerkraut or sauerkraut juice or kombucha that's not overly sweet or sweetened, I think having fermented foods does help. So I have fermented foods every day, and so I think that really does help.
So how about the use of chronic steroids, another thing that dermatologists do a lot of? What do you feel like its impact is on the microbiome?
Well, it does suppress the immune system. And I think we're still learning, even about acne and eczema and psoriasis, we're still learning about the impact of these things. When you do something like either a steroid or a topical antibiotic or even like the bleach baths or those things, what you're doing is you're wiping out the entire biome, but what comes back is usually the same microorganisms typically. So you're just calming things down, but the idea is hopefully you'll get back to a restored system. So I don't worry quite as much about steroids because I think it's just reducing the inflammation around the biome and can sometimes, I think, help rebalance it. So it's just we have the problems of steroids of just either tachyphylaxis or which is a form of resistance in a way, or the addiction or steroid atrophy. So I limit the use. And then I like things like the topical JAK inhibitors, which is Opzelura or Vitama, or we have pimecrolimus and we have Elidel. So we have some really good topicals that are not steroids that have helped. I mean, I had a patient at Bellevue, actually, the clinic that I go to there. We had a patient who had horrible psoriasis and really didn't respond to the biologics even. Like they were just miserable, and it was biopsy proven psoriasis. I mean, when someone doesn't respond to biologics, you're like, is it really psoriasis? But then we gave him Vitama and that cleared him up. So I felt like such a hero. Like here we have a topical that is not a steroid that he can keep using, and the patient was so happy. So I think some of those topical non-steroidals are helpful, but it's not even the steroids or the ingredients in any skincare product that you have to worry about alone. It's the preservatives in them. Because if you're layering 3 or 4 different products, you're now layering 3 or 4 different preservatives, and that can be problematic. So I try to pick products that have more ingredients and one set of preservatives. And I think we're still learning about either the dose of the preservative, the concentration, or the preservatives themselves, which are more or less friendly to the skin biome. But you need preservatives in some products, but they can be
So
problematic.
how about, like, for instance, a product like Vanity Cream? They're preservative free. Is that
Yeah.
something you would recommend to a patient?
Absolutely. I recommend Vanicream all day long. That's one that I think is quite good. Vanicream, Vaniplyte ointment, the cleansers. So yeah, that's it's not easy to make something preservative free, but they did it. I have some sunscreens that are preservative free because they're pure mineral. So that's good too, because that's just inert, and it's in a pump. So there are things you can look at that are preservative free. I don't object to preservatives for the sake of preservatives. I don't look at them as endocrine disruptors or cancer causing. I just worry about the skin biome.
Right. So we know biologics are so widely used, and they're only becoming more and more popular because new biologics are coming to the market for psoriasis and eczema. So do you think that we don't really understand the impact that this is going to have on the skin?
I don't know. I mean, I think that they're life changing. I see people who are covered in psoriasis or eczema. I mean, Dupixent was, I have a patient, I hadn't seen normal skin on him in 15 years. I mean, and that's how long I've known him. He just had thick, leathery, almost erythrodermic skin, and he was miserable. And he started Dupixent and he came in, his skin was pristine. It was so beautiful. I think I cried. I was so happy. It was just beautiful. And that's life changing when you can take somebody who's so miserable and can't eat or do anything. And I mean, you can talk about stressors, all these different things. That person, there's nothing they can do. They can't avoid whatever it is that's driving it. It's just overwhelming. These are life-changing treatments, and for little kids going through this, it's life-changing until hopefully, maybe one day they outgrow it. Same thing with psoriasis. People who are covered in it or are miserable or embarrassed, now they have an easy treatment that has pretty good safety profile. I mean, some of them have better ones than others, but we have some pretty amazing biologics. I think that they are game changers. When I was in residency, we used to go through the Rockefeller Institute for 3 months a year, and we had patients there on the Geckerman protocol, which you probably never even heard of. But Geckerman, it's like a tar thing. We would like bathe them in tar for hours and hours and then put them in a light box. And one is it stinks, it stains the skin, increases the risk of skin cancer, and it's just so messy and gross. And these patients were desperate, they were miserable. So to have an injection you do once a month, 2 months, once a week, whatever it is, like whichever one you pick, however much it is, it's a pen, a click of a pen. It's so super easy, and it also helps with systemic because we know that psoriasis is a pro-inflammatory systemic conditions, and it can help against psoriatic arthritis. Some of them even help against irritable bowel issues. So there's so many options and ways to use these. I think if anything, they only help the skin biome because by normalizing skin cell turnover, you can help the biome. But I'm so grateful that we have these more targeted treatments as opposed to cyclosporin and methotrexate that we had to, worry about the liver and alcohol and other things. So it's gotten a lot easier to take care of our patients. And now we have these amazing treatments for alopecia areata that's severe that are just life changing for our patients. I mean, the self esteem aspect of hair is, I mean, your hair is gorgeous. And when I look at you, that's like what I'm looking at. When I was doing this, I was like fixing my hair. Hair is so tightly tied to our self esteem. And to have these treatments now that we didn't even have just a few years ago, it's such a blessing.
It really is. I know. I mean, hair is something that I used to work in a hair clinic, and it's so emotional. And no one,
Yeah.
everyone thinks like it only impacts men, but they don't realize
No.
it also has an impact on many females, children. So, hair is one
Yeah.
of the areas that really interest me. Before we wrap up, I do want to ask you just a few more questions. Quickly going back to acne, do you recommend salicylic acid over benzoyl peroxide? Because we know that, benzoyl peroxide again is one of like the gold standard treatments for a wash for acne, but it you have to also worry that of the consequences that you're killing those bacteria on your skin's biome.
This is true. So it does depend on the concentration. A lower concentration of 1 to 2% is not so bad, but salicylic acid is definitely more biome friendly than benzoyl peroxide.
Okay. And then in terms, I'm curious, do you get this question? You are like the biome expert. So do people come in and say to you, Dr. Day, could you give me like a diet? Tell me what to eat. Tell me what exercises to do. Just tell me basically how to live my life and give me a lifestyle plan.
Yes, first of all, they don't even have to ask. I tell them anyway. I am my dad's daughter. My dad was a doctor too, and he used to do this for his patients. He was an anesthesiologist and he used to hypnotize his patients before he put them under, and then found he needed less anesthesia. And he would hypnotize them and also get them to quit smoking or go on a diet and lose weight. So he was very into the holistic approach of things. But I do have a series. So there's a type of vitamin D that I like. I always think if you take vitamin D, it should be with vitamin K because vitamin D is good for your hair and your skin. And it's good against cancer and autoimmune things, but it also helps absorb calcium. But vitamin K helps push calcium into the bones. So I think vitamin D and K should always be taken together. So there's one that I carry. There's an immune support supplement I carry called turkey tail mushroom extract. It's a mushroom extract that's a turkey tail mushroom. And that really does give good immune support. And I learned about it from patients who were cancer survivors from Sloan Kettering, and different doctors had recommended it for them. So I do a lot of studies on these things. There's a supplement I have called resveratrol, which is resveratrol with sirtuins. Quercetin I mentioned, but there's also a pharma company called Primus, and they make three supplements that don't seem to be directly for the skin, but I use them for the skin. One is Vasculera, that the main ingredient is something called dimecin, which is orange peel extract. And orange peel really helps with bruising. People who have it's called dermatoporosis. Senile purpura is now called dermatoporosis. Ted Lane told me this, and he said that's what it's called, and that's what I have to call it. So, dermatoporosis, previously known as senile purpura. So, Vasculera can help with that. Then there's Rheumate, Ratumate, which the main ingredient there is curcumin, but these are prescription supplements. So they go through an FDA process for approval, and they go through, I think, BlinkRx. I don't work with the company. I don't have any financial interest in it, but I just learned about this stuff and I got so excited because these are things that can go through the pharmacy and are never more than $50. So I just thought that was really cool for things that are prescription grade, because a lot of supplements, you don't know the quality from one batch to the next, or one bottle to the next, or one pill to the next. So that's mostly curcumin, but has other antioxidants. I think it has quercetin also, which I think is really good. And then the last one is called Fastium Plus, which has genistein, which is good for collagen building, has the vitamin D with vitamin K, and some other ingredients that are designed for bone, but also I like the collagen building aspect of it. So those are ones that I sometimes recommend as well, depending on what it is I'm trying to treat. And then nicamide is another supplement that I give to all my acne patients. That's a prescription supplement that has niacinamide. Niacinamide and nicotinamide are the same. That's I don't know why it has two names. They're not the same as niacin, but niacinamide and nicotinamide are the exact same thing. And it has copper, zinc, and folic acid. And a lot of patients tell me it works like an antibiotic for them, even though it's not an antibiotic. Some people do get stomach upset. And then there's Nutrafol, which is a supplement that I use for hair growth. I think those are good stress adaptogens. I think they're well sourced. they're good ingredients that can help. My mom calls it the miracle pill because at 90 it's helped her grow hair and she's so happy. But there's a lot you can do. So I will tailor it for the person. And for exercise, if you're not doing anything, walking is great. Getting 3 or 5 pound weights, and while you're watching TV, do that. But also squats. There's the hand grips and just standing watching TV. Do 10 squats, then 20 squats, then 30 squats. It takes 5 minutes. You don't have to go to the gym and work out. Just standing up and going down with your own body weight will do so much for you, and you feel better.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Day. It was a pleasure talking to you. I learned so much, and hopefully I'll see you soon. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Derm Club podcast. If you found the discussion today to be valuable, please subscribe and share. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode as we continue to delve into dermatology and skincare with the world experts.